Hi, I'm Malika Bilal, filling in for Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, Vancouver residents are using hashtag #Don'tHave1Million to protest soaring real estate prices. So why is it so expensive to own a home in this Canadian city? Well, taking over my usual duties as digital producer is Omar Badar, and you have some fun facts and stats in our app today.
Depends on who you are. They're fun if you're an investor, certainly making a profit.
Very true.
But if you're looking for a house, they're probably not so much fun. You have here, the average property sale in Vancouver is approximately $850,000. That's nearly 10 times higher than the area's average household income. This is among other facts that folks can find at the Streams app, which you can download at the link that you see at the bottom of the screen. In the meantime, you can join this conversation by tweeting us using the hashtag AJStream, and we'll try to get to those tweets during the show.
Hi, I'm Brent Todderin. I'm a city planner and urbanist here in Vancouver, a planning consultant and former chief planner for the city of Vancouver, and I am in the stream.
The city of Vancouver is Canada's hottest real estate market, where the average price for a single-family home now tops 1 million Canadian dollars, which at the current exchange rate is approximately 800,000 US dollars. Well, soaring housing prices have frustrated many young people who find it increasingly difficult to own or even to rent in the city they call home. One person decided to take her frustration out via Twitter. Evelyn Shaw started tweeting in March about housing affordability in Vancouver using hashtag #Don'tHave1Million. Well, the hashtag went viral as it struck a chord with many in the city. The online momentum led to a campaign called Vancouverites for Affordable Housing. So over the weekend, hundreds of people attended a rally to protest the high cost of homes and to call for a national housing strategy that would alleviate the rising prices of property. So why is Vancouver so expensive, and what will it take to make housing prices more affordable? Well, joining us to discuss, Evelyn Shaw, an affordable housing advocate who started hashtag #Don'tHave1Million. Paul Kershaw, a policy professor at the University of British Columbia and founder of Generation Squeeze. That's a group looking to establish a lobby voice for young Canadians. Saeed Fard, housing advocate, entrepreneur, and blogger. And Andy Broderick, Vice President of Community Investment Van City, as a community credit union. Welcome to the stream, everyone. Now, Saeed, I want to get started with you. If you could paint us a picture. If I were a young adult in Vancouver, mid to late 20s or 30s, and I was looking to buy a home, what's the reality for me? What am I facing?
Well, the reality is in most cities, Seattle, for instance, where I used to live, you'd probably start with an apartment and then you'd graduate to a home as you build equity. In Vancouver, even an apartment, let's say a two-bedroom apartment outside the downtown core is going to run you at least $500,000, and even apartments are reaching the $1 million mark. So it's become completely inaccessible to most people. You're looking at parents helping their kids buy, or simply more realistically, people in their late 20s are leaving Vancouver. There's a massive glut of people, I'd say, between the age of 25 and 35 in this city, particularly young professionals who have left to the East Coast, to the Valley, to America. But there's a real glut of people in that age demographic here.
So if I'm facing $500,000 home prices, is my salary commiserate to that? Or does that equal out?
No, and the bizarre thing about Vancouver, I think as the viewers wouldn't know, is that despite having the highest real estate prices in Canada, it doesn't have anywhere near the highest salaries. And even by Western Canadian standards, it has low salaries as well.
So Evelyn, I want to go to you because, of course, Saeed just painted that picture for us. So you are now at the center of a campaign because of a hashtag you started. I have some pictures on my laptop. This is via Facebook, and this is you speaking to a crowd of people who went out, who clearly support the movement that you have started. What caused you to start this, and tell us about the reaction to it?
The reaction's been, overwhelmingly positive. 90% of people 100% agree with me. 10% of people are maybe apathetic, and a few of them don't want to see any change. They like the status quo. But what's happening in the city is that people have finally found an outlet to talk about this issue, because I think for a very long time people felt like they couldn't say anything. They thought that they were destined to either leave the city or to, rent for the rest of their lives. And I don't I'm a renter. I don't mind renting now, but that's not the question. The question is in 10 years, when I have 2 kids, when I'm raising a family, where am I going to end up? And I might have to leave Vancouver.
So Evelyn, you started the hashtag don't have 1 million, but if you go to the website don'thaveone million.com, you see this on my screen over here, giving away $1 million in real estate services for the Vancouver area. And then you have Lewis, who's one of the people behind this website, who sent us a video comment. Take a listen to this.
As a realtor, I see the struggles firsthand, and when I saw the Don't Have 1 Million campaign, I got together with other local real estate professionals to create a monthly lottery where one lucky buyer will win up to $20,000 in cash and donated real estate services, plus numerous second and third place prizes. This is perfect for that buyer that feels stuck and needs that extra help with the down payment to achieve their real estate dreams. We've had a tremendous response so far and already in talks with local developers to add to the grand prize. Go to don'thaveone million.com to learn more.
Evelyn, do you find this sort of thing helpful, or is it just exploitative of a cause that you've basically...
It's definitely exploiting the situation. I tried to reach them, and they blocked me on Twitter. I said told them that they were confusing people. They thought, people thought that I was that hashtag or I was that Twitter handle. And, in the end, what can I do? It's not like I was going to, fight them in court for it. But I think people will see through sort of their tactics. They'll understand that they're just trying to sell their services. But we're not talking about, wanting their services. We're talking about a crisis in Vancouver that needs to be addressed from the government and by the government, and that's not happening.
And Paul, you look like you found that amusing. So I want to show you something else. This is on my laptop. Now, this is the real estate agency, homes.com, and we wanted to know how many homes in Vancouver were in the $1 to $2 million range. So we did a little search, and we found 663 results across different neighborhoods in the city. Now, Paul, I know that you live about an hour and a half away from your place of work. What is it that you face?
Well, I think like many Vancouverites and really Canadians more generally, I'm part of a demographic that has seen in my province salaries for full-time work for the typical young person be about $9,000 lower than it was in 1976 if we adjust for inflation. And we earn so much less, even though we're more than twice as likely to have post-secondary. And here in Canada, post-secondary has gone up so much more than it was in the past. So we start with larger student debts. And then after going to school longer to take jobs that pay less, we then face across the country housing prices that have more than doubled. And in my particular city, they've gone up in an insane way still further than that. And so it's leaving younger Canadians like myself squeezed for time and money. And I happen to be a professor who has more security than most young people ever will because I get tenure and I make a pretty decent income. And if it's actually impacting my ability to live near the city, that makes me particularly worried for the vast majority, the people at the middle, and then those who fall below the middle.
Andy, what's causing this? Why are we seeing this trend?
There's just a significant amount of demand, and there has been for a long time in Vancouver. What's great about this conversation is that it's finally bursting the bubble and allowing people to chat about speculation and the challenges of speculation in this market. I think this, the results have been a really good conversation. This week alone, we had the mayor come out for support a speculation tax, which again I don't think is the solution, but is one approach. And again, I think what is really wonderful about it is that finally these trends are being identified and elevated, and we're going to put it in a policy framework so that we can actually do something about it.
So we have another video comment here from Raheem who disputes, he basically says there's more to it than just a matter of supply and demand. Take a listen to this.
I don't really know how much of the property prices have been driven by foreign buyers. We don't really collect enough data in the area. I do know that at the last 2 open houses I went to, both buyers were foreign and not residents of Vancouver. Our property prices have been going up a lot faster than our incomes have, and so you feel like the money's got to be coming from somewhere.
Saeed, given the fact that the prices are going up faster than incomes are, do you think that this is a foreign investment issue?
I mean, the person whose video we just saw, I think, spoke to the crux of the problem. I do think it's, at least in large part, a foreign investor issue. The problem is policymakers and government on all 3 levels of government have been dragging their feet on collecting the data and using the term, we need more data over and over again in their speeches as a way to drop away from the issue. I mean, we've been hearing this. I've been a resident in Vancouver for about 3 years now, and I've been hearing this call for more data from people and governments for a while. And it's a shame that we don't have the data, but I forget the expression, but if it looks like a duck and sounds like a duck or whatever it is, enough people in this city, I think, would point their finger at foreign investment.
Paul? Andy, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think there are a lot of factors that work to it, and there's been a lot of benefit derived by municipalities in terms of their tax base and their ability to use an elevating market to address the provision of services. I mean, there are more community centers in Vancouver. It's a beautiful place. So, I mean, while foreign investment is an issue, I think the bigger issue is really that municipal policy isn't focused on building housing that's required by young people who want to raise families. A lot of what's getting built is aimed at a market that isn't focused on where the real need is in terms of keeping a vibrant community. And municipalities do have the tools to decide what kind of development they want to see.
Well, picking up on that point, I actually want to read a comment from the mayor, Gregor Robertson. This is something that he posted on Facebook for all the world to see. Evelyn, take a look at this. Gregor writes, City Hall is doing what we can to shift the housing market towards more affordable housing, whether it's through incentives to build rental housing instead of condos, requiring more family units, or investing a record $61 million into affordable housing this year. So my eyes pick up at the part where he talks about the rental housing. Is that an option, and should that just be where you decide to put your efforts?
Oh, of course. I'm renting now, and I'm a very, very happy renter right now. But at the rally, I heard from so many people who say rents are going up disproportionately as well to their salaries. They cannot even afford their rents. A two-bedroom condo here will rent for at least $1,800, right? For an average family, that is way too much money, and that's just 2 bedrooms. What if you have 3 kids? It'll be even more difficult.
Saeed?
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that. Part of the problem with renting, and I've heard this argument a lot, is that renting is good in the short term, but people build equity and wealth through housing. And what's happening is particularly in Vancouver, but I see this across the board in Canada, there's now this dividing line between, going back to the have and have-nots, where if you have real estate in Vancouver, you've become a millionaire overnight. And if you were unlucky enough to be renting and not be able to enter the market a decade ago, 5 years ago, you haven't made that commensurate wealth. And the more we push people towards rental versus owning property, the more we're allowing that dividing line to exacerbate.
Well, let me just jump in there for a second, because you can either have housing exist as a retirement plan or a speculative investment, or you can have it exist to provide a roof for people. You can have it exist to provide what's necessary to raise a family. So, I mean, it's hard to be complaining about the over speculation in this market, and at the same time saying you want to preserve the opportunity for people to build their futures around housing as a piece of equity. So, again, I just think it's an issue that needs to be understood and addressed. Lots of communities have built shared equity models where they've actually tried to limit how much appreciation occurs, because honestly, most of the value in this community comes from the amenities that exist, from the fact that we're all here and we're all building a place that people want to come to. So looking at where the value of real estate comes from and not seeing it privatized is a pretty important issue to begin to talk about. And you're seeing that when someone talks about a speculation tax, they're trying to, in a weird way, sort of jump in and sort of say, what does housing exist for?
And Andy, those amenities are for our community that doesn't know Vancouver. Paint a picture for us. What are those amenities?
Again, it's not only Vancouver. There's Burnaby. There's Surrey. The Canadian tradition, and again, as I've mentioned, I'm new. There's very supportive of neighborhoods, very supportive of providing good services. Not only is there healthcare in Canada, there are very good community centers. There's great hockey rinks, great swimming pools. There's beautiful bike infrastructure, great public transportation that we need to have more of. There's a commitment to investing in community here that isn't the rule around the world, and it makes it a very attractive place to live, whether you're renting or owning. And I do think there are big issues that have to be flagged around the break between wages and real estate prices. And I'm glad we're having this conversation.
So we have people who are commenting here on Facebook who are talking about how, basically suggesting that this issue might, the problem might be exaggerated. You have Steve over here who says the only way out is to work harder. Real estate is becoming a more and more exorbitant venture across the world. And then you also have Monica over here who says, pay or hit the road. It's ugly, but it's a fact. Vancouver is the Sun Belt for all of Canada, so suck it up. Paul, what do you say to people who basically suggest that it's a little too entitled to think that middle-class people can actually buy homes in one of the most beautiful cities in Canada?
Well, I think Canada is a prosperous country where we're actually more prosperous now than we've ever been, and yet many a young person finds it difficult to make a go of it where they grew up or they trained, not just in my city, but increasingly across the country. Canada's got more prosperity than it's ever enjoyed before, but so many more young people say that they can't afford to start a family, or when they do, they can't afford enough time at home with their kids because they're struggling to pay for the much more expensive housing on lower earnings. And I think no matter what we believe the solution might be, whether it's the way we change taxation on high-value housing, or we change zoning, or we build more rental suites, etc., no matter what option somebody favors, the big question is, how do we translate that policy recommendation into reality? And this is one place where younger Canadians really do need to look in the mirror, because we are far less effective at influencing the world of politics than our other groups, including people we love, like our parents and grandparents. We've had a great group called the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, been lobbying on behalf of our parents and grandparents for decades in this country. But there's been no corresponding group building that clout for younger Canadians. And as a result, the issues that really pressure younger Canadians are far less often talked about until someone like Evelyn has succeeded with a clever hashtag to galvanize some attention at this moment on housing, for example. And so what we're saying in Generation Squeeze is, let's learn from the wisdom of our parents and grandparents, and let's match their ability to influence the world of politics and bring some balance to it so that we can protect the housing that our parents and grandparents need, the medical care and old age security that our grandparents need, while simultaneously ensuring that there is a willingness and an aspiration for governments of all political stripes at all levels to adapt urgently for younger Canadians too. And right now, we don't have much evidence in this country that there is that willingness to make the country work for all generations.
Right.
And it's a brilliant idea, and we've been very supportive of it, and here at Van City, and we're going to continue to support it. I think Paul makes a great point. You can never have too much involvement in policy and politics. So the more the merrier.
And I love that idea of gathering young people together to lobby in their benefit, really. One of the places that some of that lobbying is happening, of course, is online. And I want to show you a tweet response to something the mayor tweeted out. This is interesting. So Gregor wrote, "Housing is essential. It's not a commodity. Young people must be able to afford Vancouver." So he got a response from someone named Andrew online. Andrew says, "Well, then do something about it. Talk is cheap. Vancouver is seeing an exodus of millennials, and it ain't good." So Saeed, pick up on the exodus here, and I hear Andy also wanting to get in, so you can jump in after Saeed, but is this leading to brain drain?
I mean, it absolutely is. I work in the tech industry, and there's about 350,000 Canadians, not just Vancouverites, but Canadians who live in the Silicon Valley. I think that's something like 1% of the Canadian population, and that tends to be heavily skewed towards engineers, people in the knowledge industry. And I speak to them on a regular basis. I mean, whether we're trying to recruit them or build partnerships with people in the Valley, the number one thing I hear about people who don't want to move to Vancouver is housing.
Andy?
Yeah, no, we think it's a problem. It's a developing problem. But all I was going to say is that I do think the mayor, interestingly enough, of all the municipalities across Canada, has been very active and is working to become more active. And frankly, this kind of support, Paul's group, if the hashtag, all of these things will work to really deepen the level of commitment that's coming through. And all I can say is
agree with that. I think the mayor has actually done quite a lot. He's very concerned for the residents, but where we see lack of action is actually in the provincial and the federal government level. In the province, our premier has actually said to us that she's not going to do anything, and she's not even going to research the data on foreign ownership. We're just asking her to give us the data, to show us the data that this is a problem, or maybe if it's not a problem, then we can look somewhere else. But at the moment, she's not giving it to us, and that's got to change.
So this is one place where the conversation about the degree to which foreign investment is driving the rising prices relative to other factors welcomes us actually pointing out that there are many people in Vancouver and all of my province on the Pacific Ocean who are quite happy with the high housing prices. It's my mom and my grandmother. They've been making out very well by having had homes in the province for several decades, and much more so than some foreign investor across an ocean. My mom and my grandmother care about their kids and grandchildren. And just as Evelyn's mom and dad care about her. And I think one of the things we can start to do is have both demographics, younger and older, pressuring our our premier and our prime minister to say, we got to make the housing situation in this country work for young and old alike. And that is something that I think can actually create an intergenerational combination of voices, as opposed to pitting generations against one another.
And there is a history for that here in Canada too. I mean, you had in the 60s and 70s and early 80s, really big investment in family housing. Cooperative housing in this province and in Canada is a really interesting alternative to ownership. It gives some of the control and tenure rights that you get around ownership combined with rental structures. So there's a history of policy response that's been effective, and we're looking forward to that following.
Yeah.
I just want to backtrack a little bit and touch.
I've been hearing a lot.
Hang on just one second.
Just one moment. We're just trying to get the community in because they're all watching.
Yeah, I'm coming to you, Ellen, with this question. We have some people who are struggling with how they can talk about foreign investors. So you have Sneaky C here, who says Vancouver is being colonized. It's way too crowded and expensive for locals. Massive heroin problem. No future here for locals. Goes on to say, halt immigration now. Tax the hell out of foreigners. Which raises this question by Travis, who says, I would start with this question. How do we limit foreign home and land investment without being or seeming racist? Evelyn, do you want to take a stab at this?
Oh, for sure. And at the rally, I said, I'm Chinese Canadian, right? And there are so many Chinese Canadians who've written to me, who came to the rally and said the same thing, which is we were raised here. We have invested our lives here. We cannot afford to stay either. So it's not a race issue, because a lot of the attention is targeting, the Chinese sort of mainlanders who are purchasing the homes, but that's not the point. If it's, China purchasing this year, it could be the U.S. purchasing next year. It could be Russia purchasing the year after that. That's not the point. There are no policy restrictions in place at all for any non-resident, non-Canadians right now, and we want the government to do something about that. Australia has done something about it. Singapore has done something about it. Hong Kong has done something about it. So it's not a race issue. It's about wealth and the inequality and the gap of the inequality that's happening in the city.
And I see our guests nodding their heads. I want to show you something on my laptop just to give us a more clear sense of what it is we're really talking about, especially for our audience that's watching from abroad who might be shocked by this. This is Vancouver homes listing prices. So a home, a 4-bedroom home, 2.5 bath in 2002 in one neighborhood of Vancouver was $559,000. In 2014, it was over $2 million. You see that across neighborhoods. And this is information provided by Van City, which of course is Andy's credit union. So Saeed, when you see this, and we're talking about solutions and where to go from here, is home ownership overrated?
I don't know if it's overrated, and it's funny seeing that statistics, because I used to live in Kerrisdale. I used to rent there, and you could say I was pushed out of that neighborhood because home ownership there became impossible. I don't know if it's overrated. I almost, if I could, I want to touch back on this entitlement issue that came up a bit earlier, because it seems like it's been tilted over its head. I mean, people say, get over it, move out. Vancouver is the Sunbelt of Canada. The truth is, Vancouver's always been the Sunbelt of Canada. It's only over the past decade that we've seen this shift in the real estate market that's become so unaffordable. Vancouver's always been expensive, but the degree of real estate appreciation compared to the rest of Canada is almost twofold over the past decade. And you can point to interest rates, you can point to other things, but the only differentiating factor between Vancouver and, say, Toronto and Calgary, which have much more robust economies, is that Vancouver has disproportionately a large influx of foreign investors. And so while you hear these arguments about we need data, and I agree data is going to strengthen the argument, practically every paper and piece of anecdotal evidence, and then there are some academic papers that have tried to measure the impact of foreign investment, they've all pointed to the same thing, that foreign investment is a factor.
We'll discuss what to do about foreign investment, whether or not there should be levies and taxes, and whether or not foreign investment is really the place we should be looking at, and if there are other factors that play into this. But unfortunately, we have to put the conversation on pause for now. We'll pick up with all of our guests in the online post show at stream.aljazeera.com. Now, on our next show, fears of a Russian invasion in the Baltics. Could Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania become the next Crimea? Well, that's a conversation for tomorrow. You can tweet us your thoughts on that. And in the meantime, we'll see you online. So this is the Stream's online post show. We've been talking about reasons behind the high prices of real estate in Vancouver and the impact this is having on young professionals in the city. So we're looking forward to solutions. So I pulled one up on my laptop. You can tell me whether or not you think it's a solution. This is a petition on change.org to restrict foreign investment in Greater Vancouver's residential real estate market. You can see it has nearly 25,000 signatures. It needs about 235 more to get there. Paul, what do you think of this?
Well, the public policy professor in me always worries about making policy in the absence of having good data. And while I think Saeed's on track that there's no doubt that foreign investment is a factor, I want us to make the policy in the light of having a more comprehensive sense of just how big a factor. And no matter what, one of the challenges facing Vancouver right now is our population just is much larger than it was a generation ago. This is the norm across our country, across the entire planet. And the reality about real estate, it is one of those things where you've got a fixed amount of space, and to some degree that then over time puts an increasing premium on the space. So I think we have to look both in the housing market, how we deal with taxing of speculation, how we deal with taxing of high value homes more generally, because we've now got those who are our homeowners, they're going to be passing on to their kids at some point, and we at some point need to say not everybody has a parent to pass on $1 million home to them, and what are we going to do about that? And lastly, we also need to ask ourselves, what else is going on in the lives of young people when they're starting their jobs earning less and trying to start a home by paying more? It's also a major biological moment where they're wanting to start families. And right now, the cost of sharing time at home with a new baby costs the equivalent of a second mortgage that people will forgo from their income when they're on parental leave in our country. And if they look for child care, they'll have to pay a third mortgage. We could take those family expenses and with policy tomorrow, fix those and save young people tens of thousands of dollars with which they would then be far better positioned to deal with today's way higher housing prices.
Saeed, on that solution that Malika just mentioned, we have a more specific version of it here online. You have Justin who says no numbered company should be allowed to buy single family homes, only individual income taxpayers should. What do you think of that?
I mean, I like it. I think that's a small part of a broader solution. The interesting thing about this problem is that it's not a unique problem to Vancouver. We can look at other models, as Evelyn mentioned. Australia has had to deal with this, so has Singapore. And for instance, in Australia, as a foreigner, you can only buy new property. And so if you want to make the economic argument that foreign investment is going to boost new construction, well, they focused it on that angle. So you can't buy existing homes or condos in Australia. If I could add on to Paul's earlier comment, though, about requiring data, personally, and I know I disagree with some of the people on this, while data is important, because I've seen so much foot dragging on that for so long in Canada and Vancouver specifically, I kind of liken it to any policy, let's say littering. Sure, it'd be nice to know how much people are littering before you make it a bylaw to say you can't litter. But if you think it's a problem, regardless of the magnitude of that problem, why not come forward with some kind of policy that would deal with it? And in Vancouver, what we're seeing is such a perversion of the local real estate market. And I use that word in the sense that the local economy is so now divorced from the real estate market that any policy to confront that is going to be positive.
Andy?
I hope as you noticed, the realtors respond so quickly to the opportunity to steal the hashtag that the local economy actually isn't divorced from the real estate market. There's a lot of people making a lot of money in real estate, and whether that's good or bad is another question. I mean, foreign ownership, may be an issue, but I would really encourage people to look at all the policy levers. Again, it may very well need some action, but to look at it in isolation, I think is a real mistake, and I think it's going for a simple, emotional response. Investment is investment. I mean, capital finds ways. You can those new policies that you're talking about in Australia are new. What their effect is not clear. So I would say, yeah, let's look at that. Let's maybe do it. But let's also there's many other things that can be done, that need to be done, to make sure that the housing Canadians need to live in and raise families is here.
Yeah, if I can jump in here, I thank you, Andy. At the rally, I mentioned many different things that could be done. So yes, tax and speculation is one. Getting some data on foreign ownership is one, because in the meantime, we're wasting a lot of time talking about this ad nauseum in circles because we've been unable to move forward. But the other thing I mentioned, which was more directed at the municipal government, was stop building those bachelor pads that cannot accommodate families. We need large, 3-bedroom family units to be built in the city, and the city can pressure the developers to do that, but they haven't been, or at least I haven't seen enough action on that. So a lot of us would be happy living in a condo, right, if we can raise our family until they're 16 in a large enough suite, but there aren't so many suites out there, and people are struggling, and that's why they're leaving.
So
Yeah,
we have
I agree.
more suggested solutions here from our online community. You have Heather here on Twitter who tweeted in saying, taxes on the wealthy, get real estate investors to fund affordable housing, strong rent controls to keep rentals affordable. And then you have Nicholas here on Google Plus who says, instead of propping up poverty wages with taxes, governments should be putting this money towards affordable housing and getting big businesses to pay livable wages with the taxes that they are not currently paying. Paul, do you think this is dragging this issue too wide when you start dragging in getting companies to pay a livable wage, or is this to you related? Is this part of the solution for this?
I think it is fundamentally related because across our country and in many other places, what you see is stagnant wages, especially for young people entering into the market, and then rising costs of housing. And so we can expect more from our employers to try and deal with some of that problem, although no employer is going to be able to deal with the skyrocketing cost of housing in Vancouver per se. So we'll have to find a range of mechanisms, as Andy talks about. But no matter what mechanism we aspire to put in place, I think one of the key things that Generation Squeeze is adding is how are we going to make it so? And so that's why we're trying to convince younger Canadians in particular to recognize that a lobby may not sound like it's the Mockingjays bow or the One Ring to bind them all or Luke Skywalker's
Love
lightsaber.
the references.
But it could make each and every one of us as powerful in our own adventure of being change makers on a city, province, and national scale, because if any hero who wants to make a big change needs the right tools at the right time so they're powerful enough to face off the big problem. And a lobby can do that. It can give us enough power to safeguard the medical care and old age security that our parents and grandparents need, while simultaneously encouraging governments to adapt urgently for younger Canadians to ease our time, our money, our service. And we haven't really even talked much about our environmental squeeze. And so that's the game that Generation Squeeze is trying to get into.
Right.
Encourage younger Canadians to build our clout so that we have the tools and the power to be grand change makers on a national scale.
Right, and I see Andy nodding his head. I want to throw something out there, though, and this is really picking up on something that Andy mentioned a little bit earlier on not looking at this in isolation. So in 2013, the Stream covered a different housing crisis out of Vancouver, and this was a crisis of gentrification. You had residents of Vancouver's east side, downtown east side, saying that they were being priced out of the neighborhood. And so the city introduced a policy of accommodating low-income housing residents, partnering with people who were developing these houses to make sure some of them were set aside for low-income residents. So I'm wondering, Saeed, in your push as a housing advocate, are you partnering with low-income housing advocates to make sure there's affordable housing for all middle-class and lower-income residents?
It's a really good question. I mean, here's 4 middle-class people talking about housing affordability in Vancouver.
It does sometimes feel like a first world problem. That's, of course, a popular hashtag, but it's also a problem.
But let me
Totally.
jump in there, actually, because it's easy to see this housing issue as disconnected, but actually it is one big spectrum and it's a continuum. So pressures at the top, meaning average family who cannot afford to buy will be renting. If they're renting, they're displacing somebody who would be renting that suite, for them. And then if you move it all the way down, students are then renting suites that perhaps, a person who was low income or closer to homelessness would be. In the end, this entire issue is interlinked, and people cannot forget that. If we keep building social housing and addressing the homeless issue, that can go on forever. As long as if we don't ever address the issues at the top, that will go on forever.
And Saeed, you got cut off. We have about 30 seconds. So what were you going to say in a sentence?
I was going to say, Evelyn took the words out of my mouth, and I think the crux of all this for me is, in terms of solutions, is that governments need to attack root causes. While I like the idea of municipal governments encouraging property developers to build better condos, I see a lot of solutions being spoken of as Band-Aid solutions. The fundamental property for me is, or the fundamental problem for me is that right now residents aren't being given the same priority as, say, investors, or they're not being given a higher priority than investors. It's a free market for all. And there's fundamentally a problem with that when you have a fixed resource like real estate. If we're talking about, selling widgets, that's fine. Like global capital, global.
But remember, municipalities control the real estate. In the final analysis, in terms of zoning, in terms of approving a project, and look at how much land.
I want to throw something else out there before we end.
Oh my gosh, I would love you to throw something else out there, Evelyn, but unfortunately we're out of time. If you could throw it out on Twitter, I told you it was going to happen. We're going to run out of time. Throw it out on Twitter. Use the hashtag AJStream. You can also use your hashtag, and we'll make sure that we all discuss it. All of our guests will chime in. Our online community will as well. And so with that, I'm going to give our very last word to the community because they've been watching this show. Have so much to say.
The stream community would like to remind us that this is actually a global issue that is affecting many of them as well. You have Peter here who says this is happening in Doha, Cape Town, London, New York, Melbourne, Shanghai, Santiago. Then you have this from Facebook. Neely says Crimea River from Sydney.
I'm slightly laughing at that one, but I can relate to the woes of our Vancouverites, and so that's why I think this is a great conversation. Now, on the next show, fears of a Russian invasion in the Baltics. Could Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania become the next Crimea? You can tweet us your thoughts on that. And of course, the conversation on Vancouver continues online, hashtag AJStream.